Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third quarter EV Intelligence webinar that we host just about every quarter. And really excited to see people here and the tremendous response we've had from folks. So we've got some people attending from across the country. My name is Paula McGarrigle, and I am the co-founder, president, and CEO of Solas Energy Consulting Inc. I'm based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So I'm in Mountain Time Zone. My co-host is Gabriel Risbud-Vincent. I work at Solas Energy Consulting. We have offices in US and Canada, and we work primarily in the renewable energy, energy storage, EV, and hydrogen space. So these are all what's termed these days the energy transition space. We've been in this space for a long time. I know it's really popular these days, but we've been here for a while and we are now considered cool. So our work in EV has been primarily on vehicles that are available in the Canadian market. Frankly, there's a lot of information that's available around the US market, but we've specialized now in the Canadian market. So today we'll actually have Elena Ezquerra Silva. She will be talking to you about fuel cell vehicles. I'll be just talking about some of the stuff that's in the news, and then Gabe will be walking you through the rest of the aspects with regard to EVs. In terms of who we are, we've been around since 2009. We're a women-owned enterprise. We've worked on over 100 gigawatts of renewable energy. So to put that in perspective, that's 9 times the size of the Alberta electricity market, approximately. Worked on over 750 projects. We work usually hand in hand with our clients rather than a report that slid onto the door. And we've been brought into more and more innovation and emerging technology by our clients and through funding agencies that wish to get our review on investments. We provide essentially advisory services, and we provide those services all around the entire project lifecycle. So Solas Energy is owned by 2 women, myself and Evelyn Carpenter. Solas Energy Consulting is out, again, as I mentioned, US and Canada. The US office is in Fort Collins, Colorado, and if you haven't been to Fort Collins, definitely worth the trip. Myself and Evelyn have been in renewable energy for, in March of this year, it'll be up to 25 years for me. Our major focus is really wind, solar, and energy storage. But over the last 4 years, we've entered into the EV industry, both personally and professionally. I am totally loving driving my EV. We typically work for large clients who find out about our services from others. So there's a lot of word of mouth passing on. And we are just totally excited to help support the energy transition. So with that, I will pass it over to Gabe, who will take you through the next few slides, and then Elena will be on. I'll be back just to talk about some of the news, but it's over to you, Gabe.
All right, thank you, Paula. All right, so as Paula mentioned earlier, we'll be covering some news and some trends in the EV market, especially in Canada. And then we'll dive into hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Then we'll talk about our EV intelligence database that we've built. And we'll close off with a Q&A. So before we get into all of that, I just wanted to introduce some terms here, a lot of initialisms and a lot of acronyms in this presentation. Basically, every time you see EV, it stands for electric vehicle, except in the case of ZEV, in which case it stands for zero emission vehicle. So if you'd like to sort of either take a mental screenshot or take a picture of this slide, this will help you out throughout the presentation. And we'll make sure to keep repeating them and their definitions throughout as well. All right, and back over to you, Paula, with some news.
So we've had a couple of very interesting things happen in the last quarter. One of them is that Canada, as you know, is quite interested in joining in the energy transformation, and they don't want to be left out. And Canada has a tremendous amount of minerals that can be processed and be used in energy transition. And so recently in September this year, Volta Energy Solutions Canada has announced that they will be manufacturing copper foils, which can be used for EV batteries. So I've just put in here a map on the right-hand side showing where this manufacturing facility will be. So it's outside of, it's sort of halfway between Montreal and Sherbrooke, very close to the US border. And it'll be Canada's first copper foil factory. Volta actually has two other factories that are in operation, and they've been in the business for a very long time with regard to copper foil. They're expecting this now to go into mass production in 2026, and they're going to be selling the product all through North America. They'll be producing about 25,000 tons of copper foil per year, and then they're going to be increasing it to 63,000 tons. So that represents about 2.5 million vehicles on the road. So Volta is essentially has state-of-the-art equipment. It's focusing on long-term relationships with local stakeholders. This is a total investment of about $750 million. The Quebec government is providing a $150 million loan, which is partially forgivable, and this will create about 260 jobs. So this is pretty exciting, given that it will be up and running by 2026. It's going to be a key part of how Canada sees its place in the energy transition. And now Volta is out of South Korea, and they're a subsidiary of a company called Solas, not to be confused with Solas, Solus Advanced Materials. So we'll just go to the next slide. The next slide will bring you to the other side of the country. So this is in British Columbia. So this has been quite interesting. So British Columbia Utility Commission has rejected the BC Hydro proposed EV charging rate increase. So BC Hydro wanted to increase the rates. They wanted to increase it by about 15% and also have a tiered pricing structure in it. This was pretty interesting because this was one of the first times that we've had feedback from a regulator with regard to billing for EV. So EV has had different styles of billing, partially through just time, like how many minutes you're billing. Some, frankly, provide it free of service as just charging as a service. But BCUC came back and said, no, that this is too much of a change. So they said it was materially different than current rates. And so this has now started off a bit of a debate on the fairness of utility EV charging providers, because the utility base have got a cost of service, so they get a rate of return based on their investment, versus if you're Canadian Tire and you've now invested in a bunch of EV charging, you don't have a cost of service rate of return on those investments. And so you now have this big difference between utility EV charging providers and private EVSE charging providers. And so there's a strong debate that is coming out here. The other one is, should it be time-based or energy-based? Is there a hybrid structure? What should it be going out? So I've just got another slide on slide 9 here that just sets up these key aspects. So on the left-hand side, you can see that addressing EV charging can be based on time. And historically, that's what's been done. And part of that is that Measurements Act in Canada does require a revenue quality meter in order to be able to sell by the kilowatt hour. And that's why historically they've been selling by minutes. The other thing to note is that the time of day at which you charge is really got a different value on what that price of power is. So if you're charging at super peak time, which is like from 6 to 8 p.m. at night, the value of that electricity is a lot higher. And if you're selling just by the minute, then this could create some imbalances with regard to the value of the electricity that you're using. Some people have proposed to sell by kilowatt hour, and that can be doable by kilowatt hour. It may require some relaxation on the Measurements Canada Act because you wouldn't have that revenue quality meter. The other aspect is capacity payments. If you have an EV charger that is integrated behind the meter at a commercial building, and you want to be able to charge, say, a level 2 charger, you plug in your car, and now the building may be subject to a higher rate because they're essentially having a higher capacity charge at any one time. Now, capacity payments have not yet made their way into EV charging pricing, but it will be an interesting way to see what happens over time. In terms of the rate of charging, we also have not been charging, if they're charging by minute, they're not necessarily charging by rate of charge. So a level 2 versus a level 3. I've found that level 3s tend to be a higher rate per hour compared to a level 2. So there may be an indicative ones, but frankly, you can get a lot of level 2 chargers that are not charging at all. And then, as I mentioned on the last slide, this question of private sector versus regulated public sector. Should there be a regulated rate of return? What is a competitive charging rate? And then there's also charging as a service. If Starbucks wants to have some charging outside, then Starbucks can put that in, and frankly, you're going to pay more on a latte than you would on your energy as you charge outside. So this BC Hydro case may affect the future of charging costs in Canada. So this is going to be a very interesting one for us to watch over the next, frankly, few months as to what happens with this. But definitely it's an interesting one to be debated around EV charging. I think we're at the early days of EV charging skills, or not skills, or complexities. It'll likely get more complicated as we have higher and higher integration rates of EVs. Will be interesting to see. And then it'll be very interesting as to how hydrogen might be charged in terms of hydrogen fuel cell vehicle charging, and if this may affect some of those. So this will be quite interesting as we go. We'll definitely report back on this in another quarterly update. But who knew that BCUC might make some interesting history across Canada with regard to EV charging? I'll pass that back to you now, Gabe.
Thanks, Paula. All right, so let's get into the zero emission vehicle market in Canada. So I pulled some data from the federal government's website. And so here are the sales over the last few years of battery electric vehicles in Canada. And you can see there's a huge growth in terms of sales per quarter. So these numbers here represents the number of new motor vehicles that are registered per province. And unfortunately, our province, Alberta, does not report those numbers to the federal government. But you can see that Quebec and Ontario and BC are really leading the pack. But overall in Canada, we're now at over 6% of new registered vehicles being battery electric. It's not only battery electric that's seeing a huge growth. Plug-in hybrids were actually stagnant for the past few years, but over the last couple of quarters in 2023, they've seen a huge rise as well. Still, though, about only a third of the vehicles compared with the battery electric. And hybrid vehicles are also growing pretty quickly. So when you compare all of those to gas cars, you see that gas vehicles are slowly declining. Their sales are now at under 80%. So that's just in general where the market in Canada is going right now. And part of the reason for that is that the government of Canada has been really supporting the integration of zero-emission vehicles and hybrid vehicles. So the Canada government actually has targets for vehicle sales, and for manufacturers, they are expecting manufacturers to be selling 20% of their cars as zero-emission vehicles by 2026, 60% by 2030, and 100% should be zero-emission vehicles by 2025. And that's for light-duty vehicles. And so in order to achieve these targets, they've put in a few programs. One of them for light-duty is called the ZEV. So it's an incentive program. And then there's also two other incentive programs. So there's the ZEV IP for infrastructure, so charging infrastructure, and then the medium and heavy duty IMH ZEV program for larger vehicles, commercial vehicles. It's an incentive-based program, as I just said, and these incentives can start off at $2,500 for a shorter range plug-in hybrid, so PHEVs, vehicles, so vehicles that have the capacity, so hybrid vehicles with a gas engine, but they can also charge the battery from uh, supply equipment, and then up to $5,000 for longer range plug-in hybrids with a larger capacity battery, fuel cell electric vehicles, and fully battery electric vehicles. And there's also a tax write-off incentive for businesses. And this year is the last tax year where you will get 100% tax write-off for an electric or a fuel cell or plug-in hybrid vehicle. So this funding has been used quite a bit so far. If you pull the data from the federal government, you'll see that they have almost reached $1.2 billion of funding through these incentives. And people are mostly using them on these. So these are the 10 brands back in 2019 and the 10 brands so far in 2023 that are at the top. So Tesla used to have 30% of the share. Now they're at 22%. You see that Hyundai has taken the second spot from GM and Chevrolet over the last 4 years. And we see that Mitsubishi and Toyota are within the top 5 as well. And these are mostly thanks to plug-in hybrids. Now, so if we look at this is a chart also pulled from this iZEV program. And you can see that this number that we had before of about a third of the sales being plug-in hybrids compared with battery electric, it's still the case here. And for fuel cell electric vehicles, they were only included in this incentive program in 2022. And since 2022, 11 fuel cell electric vehicles have used the funding in 2022 and 6 so far in 2023, in the first 2 quarters of 2023. All right, and then on top of that, there's also the medium and heavy duty program. So the government actually lists which vehicles are eligible for this incentive program on their website. And so far, over $26 million have been given out. So it's not quite the 1.2 billion for light duty vehicles, but 26 million still is a lot. And it was given over 2 years to just under 1,000 vehicles. Most of them are going towards Ford vehicles right now. So the fleets that are using Ford are most likely e-transit, multi-purpose vans. And then there's a few going to semi-truck manufacturers as well, or I should say purchasers of semi-trucks. All right, and then we usually cover in these webinars, we cover provincial incentives as well. So there haven't been too many updates on provincial incentives. A couple of note are that the Northwest Territories now have the largest incentive at $7.5 grand on top of the federal incentive. So the territories are doing pretty well. They also even provide incentives for ATVs, electric boat motors, and snowmobiles. And one other thing of note is that Alberta used to have funding for EV chargers, and they no longer do. That program has ended their funding round. You can see here that a lot of the provinces and territories have rebate programs on top of the federal programs. All right. Speaking of chargers, we might have to go into, it might be useful to talk about the different levels of charging. So level 1 means basically plugging in your battery electric vehicle, your plug-in hybrid vehicle into the wall. So it's only 110 to 120 volts, and it takes a long time to charge. So you don't see these at public stations too often because it would mean parking somewhere for a very long time. And so typically the more readily available commercial chargers are level 2, level 3, where you get higher amperage, higher voltage, and faster charging time. So as of this month, there were just over 24,000 charging ports at 10,000 charging stations across Canada. So every year we see a lot of growth in this sector in Canada. If you look at a map, you can see that pretty much follows population basically, but we're seeing a lot of level 2, level 3 chargers. Unfortunately, the few hydrogen stations are sort of hidden behind a lot of these dots here. But if you take a look at this map from h2stations.org, you can see that there are a few available hydrogen refueling stations in Canada, quite a few in California. But in Canada, we have at least 5 publicly available charging stations right now, closed ones, and then in Mississauga and Edmonton, we have some privately available ones as well for commercial operations. All right, and with that, I'll pass it over to Elena, who will talk about hydrogen a bit more.
Yeah, so now we're gonna dive into how does a hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle works and what are some of the technical characteristics of them, if they are feasible, if they are not, if they are safe to use. We'll look into that in the following slides. So here, this is a diagram of the main components inside of a hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle. So it is important to understand that it operates fairly similar to an electric vehicle. There is an electric motor that is powered by the electricity generated by a fuel cell stack. And then this motor converts electrical energy into mechanical power that will move the vehicle. So yeah, the whole system inside of this vehicle is mainly electric, but the power, instead of refueling or charging the vehicle, you will refuel it with hydrogen the same way you will refuel any other gasoline vehicle. So the way this works, there is a hydrogen fuel cell stack. That means there is a numerous number of fuel cells that are stacked all together. Usually the type of fuel cell that is used inside of a hydrogen vehicle is the proton exchange membrane fuel cell. The reason why this fuel cell is used is because this fuel cell is capable of converting the hydrogen and the oxygen into an electric current and water vapor. On this diagram, this is an electrochemical device that allows this electrochemical reaction to take place in the presence of catalysts. And these are the reactions that are happening inside of the cell. As I mentioned, the only byproduct is water vapor. That means that the only tailpipe emissions from this is water vapor. Therefore, there are no GHG emissions, and that is why this is a zero emission vehicle, is because it doesn't generate any harmful gases to the environment. And the way this hydrogen is stored inside of the vehicle is through hydrogen storage tanks that are at very high pressures. And how do you get this hydrogen into your vehicle? Well, you will need to recharge it in a hydrogen refueling station. Usually the hydrogen refueling stations, they dispense pressurized gas at either 70 or 35 megapascals. This refueling process only takes very few minutes, similar to any gasoline refueling station process. So you can see this is a fairly similar vehicle. I'll say it's a mixture of an EV and a gasoline refueling station because it is as simple as a gasoline vehicle, but at the same time, it is sustainable and clean as an EV. So this is the quite a few examples of the existing vehicles available in the market. There is the Hyundai Nexo and the Toyota Mirai. These are the most common and popular hydrogen and ready available in the market. They have a driving range between 600 and 800 kilometers. They can drive up to 179 kilometers per hour at top speed. The capacity of the hydrogen tank inside of them is of 5 kilograms. And then there are other, those are the light duty vehicles available in the market, but there are also heavy duty vehicles, trucks that operate with hydrogen. There is a Volvo semi-truck, there is a Hyzon semi-truck that if you've been at the hydrogen, at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention, you've probably been able to see one of those. And there is also a Toyota Kenworth T680 truck. So these trucks ranges are between 500 and 1500 kilometers, and most of these trucks can store between 50 and 60 kilograms of hydrogen and have a motor power up to 310 kilowatts. Talking a little bit more on how this hydrogen will be available to refuel a vehicle, where this hydrogen comes from, and how can we make it sustainable and zero emissions. So there are really multiple pathways to produce hydrogen, and it really depends on where this hydrogen comes from that will determine whether this is a low carbon intensity energy source or not. So right now, most of the hydrogen being produced in Canada is gray hydrogen. That means it comes from natural gas, and the process is through steam methane reforming. However, this process doesn't include carbon capture. That makes this type of hydrogen very high carbon intense. However, if you incorporate the CCUS process into this, you will be able to reduce emissions, therefore have a clean hydrogen or a low carbon intensity hydrogen source. But then there is another way of producing hydrogen, which is through electrolysis. So if you use an electrolyzer, which is basically the inverse processes of a fuel cell, where you basically insert electricity into this electrochemical device, you will split a water molecule and generate hydrogen. So this is a green hydrogen production pathway. However, this is still a little expensive compared to the blue or gray hydrogen processes, but it's a very low carbon intensity production pathway. And then the third option will be nuclear. So it is again through the water electrolysis. However, the energy source will come from nuclear energy. These are some of the leading. So Canada is right now one of the leaders worldwide on hydrogen production and utilization. One of the way we see it and the way we've divided the hydrogen research and development areas in Canada. The first one is the hydrogen production. There are multiple companies that are leading on pyrolysis, reducing the cost of green hydrogen as well as blue hydrogen, and then the methane thermal cracking, which is also a new way of producing blue hydrogen at low cost. Then the other one is energy systems and pathways. So there are multiple organizations in Canada and research centers that are looking into forecasting, market studies, techno-economical assessment, where, for example, they evaluate which is the most feasible way of producing hydrogen at low cost and at low carbon intensity. The third one is the material science and electrochemistry. Canada, especially BC and Alberta, are the two provinces that are mostly leading on the development of fuel cells, electrolyzers. These two electrochemical devices are super important for the deployment of hydrogen in the transportation sector because we need to reduce the cost of these, find more innovative ways of utilizing certain materials. Electrocatalysis is a really important area in order to make it more cost effective, reduce materials, and also make it increase the performance of these devices. And the fourth one is the storage, transportation, and infrastructure. In order to be able to utilize hydrogen within our vehicles, we need the development of more refueling stations. Also, some certain problems related to transporting the hydrogen. One of these big ones is embrittlement, and then also the development of the hydrogen vehicles and improve the storage of hydrogen on these devices. These are some of the organizations that are leading this development. Ballard, ABL, and Unilia are the top worldwide developers of hydrogen fuel cells. And then we have companies such as HDEC, Hydrogenics, and Cummins that are leading the development of refueling stations and electrolyzers. Recently, in July of this year, they have launched the 5,000 Hydrogen Vehicle Challenge in Edmonton. This is an initiative by the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub. And the goal of this initiative is to get the first 5,000 hydrogen vehicles on the road by 2028 in Western Canada. So this challenge is really encouraging. And even though if we compare it to the US, we will see much more hydrogen vehicles in the US than in Canada. But these type of programs in Canada are very encouraging because they are showing that there is this will of having more hydrogen vehicles on the road. And there's also a lot of funding that is coming from the government, as Gabe already mentioned, the details of some of these programs. That they are incentivizing and providing the means to implement these technologies and these vehicles, and also to develop their refueling stations to make it sustainable.
Now, I'll talk a little bit about EV Intelligence. So EV Intelligence is a database that we've built here at Solas. And as Paula mentioned earlier, we decided to develop this because we found that there was very little information about which vehicles are available in Canada, and that a lot of the tools for sort of deciding how to electrify your fleet were very US centric. And so we decided to dive a little bit deeper into this Canadian ZEV market. And we built a huge database that has a comparison between all the different ZEV models available in Canada, and just to get a stronger idea of what is out there in Canada, out here, I should say, and what's soon going to be on the market, and sort of a way for us to be able to compare different models. As I said, it's stuff that is vehicles that are available right now or in the near future. And we include a lot of different specifications. So anything from the battery capacity and range to safety ratings from different organizations, as well as performance specifications such as torque and horsepower that can be useful in fleet vehicles for sure. We're nearing 450 models right now, I believe, including medium and heavy duty vehicles. And that's counting all the different performance enhancing trims of vehicles. So sometimes one model will have a couple of different battery sizes, motor configurations. So include those separately to be able to better compare across car manufacturers. And we also have a twin database for electric construction machinery. So electric machinery has a few advantages over your typical combustion machinery. So, for one, there's there's the noise aspect and lower maintenance requirements as well, and obviously emission reduction. So similarly, our EV, our electric construction machinery includes a lot of different specifications, but since, there's such a wide variety of machines that exist, it's not necessarily not all of them will have the same specifications or the same important details, but we do include everything everything that's worthy of inclusion for each type of machinery. So we're not skipping out on details. It's just that they're not all apples to apples. And this database also includes charging trailers. So this is becoming a thing now on construction sites where they have electric vehicles. They need a way to charge them. And so these portable EV charging trailers are often more practical than trying to install chargers on site.
I just wanted to say that is so cool to have the market evolve to having these portable charging. It is completely fixes the question of I don't have any power on site, and now I can actually charge these vehicles, which is amazing. Thank you.
With these webinars, we are offering quarterly updates with news and advancement in the electric construction industry, electric vehicle industry. Feel free to scan this QR code, so this will lead you to our website and to the web page for the EV Intelligence database.